Vani Shukla. Welcome to another episode of Garden in Nature Southwest. Today I'm talking about how a healthy garden ecosystem can help you with pest control and keep diseases in check. When your plants get attacked by a particular pest, maybe you go and look for an insecticide that works for that specific pest. Or maybe you are looking for some organic methods, some home remedies that you prepare yourself to take care of that pest. However, with any of these things, you might often find that you have taken care of one pest situation, you've got a temporary control, but pretty soon you might be dealing with a different kind of situation, a different disease or a pest in the same species of plant or a different plant, whether it's your vegetable plants or any kind of ornamental, your flowering plants. And it's one thing after another you keep chasing after that. That leads to frustration and stress. Oftentimes you feel hopeless that nothing can grow in this harsh desert climate. There are lots of pests, and sometimes one might even give up gardening, thinking that it's just too difficult or sometimes impossible to garden in this kind of harsh climate, especially if you've moved from other areas where it's very green and it rains a lot more. So today I want to tell you about a much better way of dealing with pests. And the main thing with this method is that it's not really a method at all for pest control. It is a more holistic way of thinking about garden health. You want to shift your focus from pest control to how to make your garden happy and healthy. It is very similar to when we are thinking about our own health. If we are trying to deal with diabetes and high blood pressure issues, cholesterol issues, and not take care of the underlying cause, and if we're not trying to make our body and mind healthy, just trying to deal with the diseases itself is probably not going to give us the best results. You might keep those diseases in check, but you'll always be chasing them, and a new thing might come up if you're not dealing with the underlying lifestyle issues. On the other hand, if you create a happy and healthy life for yourself, if you're taking care of your sleep and diet and exercise and your emotional health, then it is less likely that the diseases will show up. And if they do, you are likely to recover from it quickly. A garden also works in a similar way. If we focus on creating a healthy garden, then diseases and pests, plant damage, all those things are going to be less. Even if you do get some plant problems, your garden overall is still going to remain productive. It will still look beautiful. Now, there are many components that we need to know about when we are creating this good garden health. For example, we will need to pay attention to the soil, to how much water, what kind of water, how much sun, what season are we growing in, what kind of plants we have. There's so many different components to consider when it comes to creating good garden health. Soil is a big one. That's why I made a separate episode on that. So I would definitely recommend listening to the last episode, which was about soil ecosystem. Today I will go over some of the other components and explain how these may help with the pest control. And let me emphasize that again. When we are creating a healthy garden, we do not want to focus on pest control. It will automatically happen. But if at this time you do not have that good health in your garden, it is very natural to be stressed out about the pests, about the diseases, about how much damage your plants get. And so for that reason, I will be explaining how different elements in your garden keep the pests in check. Let's start with one of the most important things that you will need in your garden, and that is a diversity of plants. Whether it's an edible garden, fruits, vegetables, herbs, or it's an ornamental garden, whether it's flowers and foliage plants, or if it's a native plant garden, it doesn't matter how you define or categorize your garden. Any kind of garden will benefit from a diversity of plants. For example, if you have a garden bed with a number of tomato plants in it, and a pest, maybe spider mites, attack the tomato plants. If the only plants that are there are tomato plants, it's very likely that the spider mites will spread from one plant to another, and pretty soon most of your plants are going to be affected. Now increase the diversity a little bit. Let's add some different vegetable plants. Let's add some peppers and okra and beans in between. Now it will be a little bit more difficult for the mites to spread from one end to the other end of the bed to that tomato plant, crossing all these other different plants. Now let's go ahead and increase the diversity even more. Let's add some herbs, basil, oregano, thyme, garlic chives, or maybe some medicinal plants that you might like. You can add all those in the same bed. And now not only you're making the physical spread difficult, but more than that, the scent from these different plants, especially the herbs and the medicinal plants, sometimes act as repellent for these pests. And on the other hand, the same scent may work as attractant to some of the other insects, which we will call as beneficial because they might be acting as predators to the pest insects. We define them as pests or beneficials, but in an ecosystem, they're just insects. And one type of insect is just feeding on another type of insect. Now, if there are a number of species of insects, they're all going to keep each other in check. And majority of the species that you find in your garden are not pests. They might be neutral. They're not really predators. They're just there. They might be acting as pollinators. Or there are many which we do not know how they benefit our garden. Anyway, when you have all this diversity of plants, it will be bringing in all those insects which are going to be taking care of different kinds of pests. So the ladybugs and beneficial wasps and praying mantis, so many others will just start to show up in your garden. You will be amazed how that happens. So what is it that's bringing these insects in your garden? It is the plants. It's the diversity of plants. If you try to just buy these insects, if you don't have a diversity of plants going on, if you don't have different species of herbs and flowers in your garden, you just try to bring these beneficial insects, you buy it online or from your local nursery, it is not going to work because these insects are not going to stay in your garden. You're going to be seeing them for a few days and they will disappear. And also when you buy these insects, you're spreading just those few species of insects. On the other hand, if you bring the plants in, if you grow a lot of different plants, the native species of insects that are local in your area will show up. And so you're supporting those insect populations as well. So plants and the scent they emit acting as repellent for the pest is one way, and bringing in all those beneficial insects is another way of how it's going to help with the pest control. Another way it helps is when you have so many different plants, they sometimes help each other. They help each other with the nutrient absorption, also helping each other with their immune system. You might have heard about companion planting, for example, planting basil with tomato. It can help the tomato plants, and the concept is the same, that different plants help each other build strong immune system, either by creating this healthy microbial life underneath the soil, or many different ways how their roots may interact with each other and help with communication when it comes to pest control. Another way that this diversity of plants and insects is going to help with pests is you're going to be also getting a lot of birds in your garden. And let me tell you, oftentimes when gardeners, especially if you've not thought in the terms of a garden ecosystem or garden health, you're just focused on plants. As I was in the beginning, I was focused on my plants, how to grow them, how to take care of the pests, how to fertilize them, just focused on the plant rather than the whole garden ecosystem. And when we have that focus and we hear about insects or birds, what comes to mind is, oh, insects are going to attack the plants and birds are going to eat all the tomatoes or fruits or whatever produce we're having in the garden. So that's what comes to mind when our focus is just on plants. However, when I moved my focus from just the plants to the whole garden, not just plants, but the other life that is in the garden, I was able to create a healthier garden with less problems, and it was more joyful. So even if you are somebody who is not really fond of insects, you might be fearful of insects, or you might be creeped out by insects, just like I am. I love seeing butterflies, but when they're up close and I get a glimpse of their body, I just somehow get creeped out. I do not like to see insects up close. However, I also realize how beneficial they are, how essential they are to our lives, to our environment, to our garden. My garden cannot be beautiful, cannot be healthy without a healthy population of insects. Also, sometimes another fear is that if you let these insect population grow, your garden is just going to be taken over by insects. You're going to be seeing insects everywhere. And that's not true. In a healthy ecosystem, all life forms should stay in balance. If it's a healthy ecosystem, they should stay in balance. So as this insect population starts to grow, you will also start to see birds, wild birds that will come in your garden. They're beautiful to look at. Your garden will become a birding place. You will be so eager to take photographs and learn about these new birds that are coming in your garden. So it will become a lot more active place. And all these wild birds that are going to be coming in, especially during the spring season, the nesting season, they're going to be consuming a lot of insects from the plants. And they do not distinguish between beneficial or pests. That does not matter to them. What species of insects are food for them is what they're going to go after. But again, the more species of birds that you're going to get in your garden, they're all going to have different food preferences, insect preferences. So they are going to be keeping them in check. Also, I see a lot of lizards in my garden. They also go after so many different insects. During the monsoon season, I see a lot of frogs and toads, which again help with controlling the insect population. So this is the most important part, I would say, to look at and to start with and to pay attention to, the diversity of plants. And then it will have this ripple effect of bringing in more insects and bringing in more birds and other small wildlife. And they will keep each other in check. You will not have pest problems on a scale where it just takes over your vegetable garden or your ornamental garden. Now let's look at some of the other components briefly. So irrigation is also important. If you're watering too much or too little, that might stress out the plants. And anytime plants are stressed, they are going to have weaker immune system. They are going to be more vulnerable to pest attacks or disease. So drip irrigation is the best way to go with any kind of garden, whether it's an edible garden or it's native plant garden or ornamental garden, whatever kind of garden you have. Drip irrigation is the best way to go. And keep the soil mulched so that there is less fluctuation of the moisture in the soil. So if you're overwatering, if you see your soil is wet most of the time when you touch it, or worse, if you see algae buildup, or if you are getting problems with slugs and snails, there's a good chance you're overwatering. So if you keep your soil mulched and you start cutting down on the amount of water till you see that even on the days that you're not watering, the soil is slightly moist. When you remove the mulch, the soil is cool and just very lightly moist. Not damp, just very lightly moist on the surface. That should be enough for the vegetable garden. For a native plant garden, even when the soil feels kind of dry above, it's still fine. They will be fine, especially if the garden is established. So irrigation, if it's too much or too little, or rapid fluctuations in the moisture level in the soil, all these things are going to affect how susceptible your plants are to the pests. Another thing to really pay attention to is the growing season. And this is true for mostly annual plants, whether it's ornamental annual plants or it's your vegetable and herbs, other edible plants. When the plants are approaching the end of season, they are usually under more stress at that time. The temperature, the humidity, the amount of sunlight, all these things are not at the optimum level that they need. And that's the time they get slightly weaker. And of course, pests are looking for that opportunity. And that's when your plants are going to be attacked. Also, if you are trying to grow a plant out of season, if you're trying to grow salad greens or cilantro or any cool weather crops in summertime, you're going to have a lot of pest problems. So if we pay attention to what's the season that's best for growing any particular plant, then we are likely to provide the optimal conditions for growing that plant, and it's going to be able to defend itself from all the different pests. The other things that you will need to pay attention to reduce stress on your plants is to look at how much sun they're getting, how is the wind protection. If the plants are exposed to hot sun all day from morning to evening, again, all that stress is going to make them susceptible. Or if they're in an area where they're getting a lot of wind damage, very likely they're going to be putting on all that energy to repair and recover from the wind damage, and meanwhile their defenses might be weak against the pests and diseases. So providing some wind protection and looking for an area where you do not get hot sun all day, where you get some afternoon shade, looking for those areas might be also helpful to protect your plants. Now, should we take some measures specifically against the pest? We're taking care of the health of the garden by all these different elements. We are creating this healthy ecosystem, but should we also do something specific against the pests? So for example, putting on some sort of screens or barriers or covers on your plants, could that work? And should we do it? So I think using screens or netting to protect your plants against insects laying eggs and then their caterpillar eating the foliage and damaging your plants, that kind of a screen or barrier might be okay for small areas, for small plant beds. It is not really practical, and it can be quite cumbersome, I think, to use it on your whole garden if you have a large vegetable garden. If you are creating a hoop house of some sort, you might have some benefit there, but that comes at the expense of some other things too. That comes at the expense of how your garden looks, comes at the expense of you're not going to be seeing butterflies in that area, or birds, or all the different activity that goes on in your garden is going to be cut down if you have just large hoop houses in your garden. So yes, you're going to have some protection against the pests, but it comes at the expense of all the other beautiful things that happen in your garden. But in a small area, I think it is worth it. So for example, if you have a small bed where you have some cauliflowers and broccoli or cabbages, and I mentioned specifically those because in one plant you will have one cauliflower head or one cabbage head, and if you lose that, that's it. Especially if you have small bed and you're growing only 2 or 3 of each, you're probably not going to be able to eat any at the end of the season. So in that case, yes, it might work to cover that small area, but the rest of your garden is still open where all these insects and birds are visiting. So how about using insecticides? Well, chemical insecticides definitely are not a good idea. They are so harmful in so many ways, not only to our health. If small residual chemical insecticides are left on the plant, or if they go in the soil, indirectly or directly, they are going to be affecting our health. Also, these chemicals will be affecting the health of the garden, which you're trying to create. They're going to be having bad effects on the microbial life in the soil, above the soil, on your plants, also all the other life forms, whether it's insects or lizards or birds and any other small critters, all of them are going to be affected. harmful effects on all the beautiful pollinators that you get in your garden, all of them are going to be affected in a bad way with the chemicals. So sometimes then we think of, okay, let's use the homemade harmless things like, let's say, soap spray or garlic spray, maybe a neem oil, things that are considered organic. And these days, a lot of organic products are available in the market as well. So how about those? Well, I think those are not a good idea either. Because again, when we are trying to create a healthy garden, that depends on having a diversity of insects, a diversity of different species of birds and other critters. These sprays do not distinguish between your pests and other beneficial insects. A soap spray, a oil spray, or neem, they're going to be affecting all kinds of insects, not just the pests. And as the insect population and the diversity of insects goes down, it's again going to have a negative ripple effect on the other wildlife in your garden. And overall, the health of the garden goes down. So if you've not looked at pest control from that standpoint of building just building a healthy ecosystem and trust it, it might be a little nerve-wracking. You might think that you're going to just lose your garden if you don't do anything. However, I can assure you, if not more productive, it is definitely going to be equally productive with way less stress that you have now. If the focus shifts from pest control to just having a healthy, happy garden. I say happy because it is indeed happy. You see all those different flowers blooming in different seasons. You get different butterflies visiting in different seasons, or birds chirping. You hear different songs. You get surprised by those beautiful birds in your garden. It is a joyful place. It is a happy place. And this happens only when we allow the garden to become healthy, when we provide the ingredient that would create this good health. Now, a very important part of how you create that healthy garden is having a little bit of patience and trust in the process. I don't want you to blindly trust the process, but I would encourage you to look around you. Look around in forest environment, where you will find so much diversity of plants. You will not find it's all taken over by weeds. The area that is taken over by weeds is usually where we have a lot of human activity. The native plant population is lost, and those areas are often taken over by weeds. There might be more pest issues and such. But if you go in a healthy forest system, you will find things stay in balance. I would encourage you to read more on what kind of plants, different plants you would like to bring in, and what are the plants that you like. The only plants that you want to stay away from and you want to educate yourself about is staying away from invasive species. So I will end today's topic here, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye.